just welcome everybody to our May 2024 edition of the Idaho Department of Labor's Labor Market Insight Series. My name is Craig Shaw, and I am the Labor Market Information Research Supervisor at the department and your host. Today, we kind of have a bit of a different subject, different take of what we normally do. Lisa Grigg, our labor economist in the Lewiston office, will be focusing on Idaho Department of Labor's primary program, the unemployment insurance, and the role the UI Navigators play. And we say UI for short because unemployment insurance, just truncating that a little bit. And then just so you know, this is very related to the labor market information insight, is because without the data that we get from the unemployment insurance system, a lot of the labor market information that we provide to you in these webinars and also through our reports and analysis for the state and nationwide wouldn't be possible without the vital tool that the unemployment insurance program provides. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, who's actually going to take care of most of this presentation and discussion. Lisa, what drew you to this topic? And I see you have a couple of guests you brought with you. Who are they?
I do have a couple of guests, and these are some of our unemployment specialists within the Idaho Department of Labor that really deal firsthand with some of these people that file unemployment. And the reason this came up is that we hear so much about the tight labor market, There's so many jobs, there's jobs everywhere. There's so few people that are not currently working that I think we kind of forget about those that actually do go through this process and what they're facing when they are actually going through it. Even though we're in an extremely tight labor market, businesses still close, and there's still a possibility that people will be unemployed unexpectedly. And so the two people here are representatives of helping get the people who are filing claims the resources they need, but also answering questions of employers and essentially trying to make sure the process is as smooth as possible. So with that, Dustin, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Dustin Mayo. I've been with the department for going on 9 years, and I'm the supervisor of our claim specialist navigator team. Those are the folks that are in the local offices.
Andrea, would you like to say something? I think we may have lost Andrea for a second. So when she comes back on, we'll get her introduction, but I'll get going. So tight labor markets, let's define that a little bit, kind of what I'm referring to when I say a tight labor market. So a tight labor market referring to the fact that we have very few people who are unemployed, significant job growth, employers aren't able to get the workforce they need, they're frustrated, there simply is more jobs available than people who are searching for work. And Idaho's really tight labor market didn't start this last year. We felt the screws tighten a lot this year, but it really started in 2018 when the state went under 3% unemployment for the first time ever. You can see on this chart here. So just let's talk about what makes up the labor force. The labor force is comprised of both those who are employed and unemployed. So the blue line is the labor force here. The orange line is the employed, and the gray line is employed. If you add up the orange and the gray, you get the blue line, essentially. And so what's happened since, I said 2018, is that we've had an incredible amount of growth in our labor force, mostly on the employed side, while unemployment has stayed really, really low. And so, again, looking at this, the natural growth of a labor force the natural direction is to grow. And even when you look at the recession periods, which are in the gray vertical bars here on the graph, you can see the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and then the pandemic in 2020. You can see that the labor force actually continued to grow during these periods, but the shift between the employment and the unemployment changed. And so if you look in 2008, 2009, you can see the employed shifted down quite a bit, but the number of unemployed actually really increased very quickly. And then again, looking at what happened with just the last 5 years, Idaho's labor force, we grew almost 100,000 people in our labor force, and 95% of that growth was employment, and 5% of that growth was unemployment. Compare that to the US average of 2% growth in 5 years, and you even saw 17 states that had labor force declines. This is just outstanding considering how tight Idaho's labor market is. Now that Andrea is back on, I'm going to give her a quick chance to introduce herself.
I'm Andrea. I work out of the Lewiston office here. I have been a navigator for approximately 4 years. Been with the department in various roles in unemployment for about the last 15 years.
So again, I just want to show you if you look at that blue line, the steepness of what's happened since about 2014, 2015, that labor force is growing at a very, very fast rate and unemployment is staying incredibly low. I do also want to mention that in this 5-year period, the last 5 years, Idaho had the second fastest labor force growth in the nation. Number 1 was Utah, but Idaho was right behind it. Again, this graph is going to compare just again, trying to show you just how tight this labor market is in pictures. So the orange line is my unemployment rate in percentages, and the unemployment rate measures those who are unemployed as a percent of the total labor force. So those who are unemployed plus employed makes up the labor force. So you can see here on the orange line that it was pretty low in 2007. You see a big recession happen in 2008, 2009. And it stays elevated actually for many years after that. And that's what sets the Great Recession apart, was that it took a long, long time for unemployment really to drop to levels it was previously. But you can see it did it. You can see in 2017, 2018, 19, unemployment rates were really, really low. They spiked up in 2020 temporarily. It was significant. Our unemployment levels went up, I think, 4 times in the span of a month. But they actually came down reasonably quickly too. So by the time we hit the beginning of 2022, we were back under 3% unemployment rates, and actually the tightest market ever. We hit 2.7% unemployment rate in 2022 compared to 2.9% 2018 and 19, which again was the first time we ever went under 3%. The blue line up at the top is the average weeks of claim duration. So if you were to take an average claim, this is the average weeks of paid benefits that went out. What you can see here too is even though this is weeks, that it follows the unemployment rate. When the unemployment rate starts rising, you actually see this duration on start to rise too. And this actually hit its lowest point as well in the last couple of years at 9.3 weeks. The US average, just for comparison, was 15 weeks for average paid claims. But I don't expect this to stay at this level. I think we're likely at a bottom potentially for both of these metrics. And so I do expect we're going to be increasing, but that's going to also be increasing potentially the length of time that people are unemployed, as well as more unemployment filings. Okay, and then another quick look at unemployment. This is the total level rather than a rate. This is the total level of unemployment. I do want to clarify that unemployment and the number of unemployed and the number of unemployment claims are not one and the same. Unemployment is declared by a survey by the US Census Current Population Survey. It's an estimate based on people's answers of whether they're currently working, or if they're not working, are they actively looking for work? And that's the determining factor on whether they are classified as unemployed or whether they're not part of the labor force. So this graph is simply showing you that over 30 years prior to the Great Recession, we had an average monthly unemployment level of around 32,000 people. Again, this is not people on claims. This is people that are estimated to be unemployed, looking for work. When the Great Recession hit, you see that go up significantly in a very fast manner. But like I said, it hovered for many years before it actually came back down. The pandemic, again, was more extreme than the Great Recession, but it also recovered much quicker. So if you look at these numbers on the right here, you can take notice of what happened right after the pandemic, that 21 to 24 period. You can see that we have the same number of monthly unemployed people in the state as we did in the 30 years prior to the Great Recession, but our labor force has increased by leaps and bounds. So when you look at percentages of the labor force, it's a much, much smaller piece of the puzzle. But I think we're also likely below Idaho's natural floor here, and it's causing great pain for employers because they simply can't find enough people, because the number of people out there is so low that are actively seeking work. It's a competitive market at the moment, and the workforce essentially has the leverage right now because there's so many jobs that are waiting to be filled. Okay, so just to kind of put this point home again, here's a look at our current labor force in the last couple of years for Idaho. So the employed 97%, the remainder is the unemployed of 3%. But again, not all these people are receiving claims. And so when we look at just that orange slice, what we see is that 1 out of 5 people in 2022 and 2023 that were potentially unemployed and eligible for benefits actually filed claims and received benefits. That's a pretty small percentage, and I think it's to the point that this system is not easy, it's complex. Not everyone needs it, but it is also just, it's a multi-step process with a lot of different rules happening. It can be quite confusing. Okay, so here again, Idaho has been leading the nation in some quarters year over year on percent of wage growth. Sometimes we've seen double-digit wage growth of 10 to 11% for any quarter over the past year, over the past couple of years. You can see the orange line is average weekly wages. This is all occupations. This is if you are employed in Idaho. This is an estimate of potentially what you're making per week with all occupations, all skills combined. The blue line is the average of the unemployment benefit claim per week. And so there's a big gap here. You can see that the claim averages 35 to 40% or so of what you might actually make if you're working. So it's a very small portion, but it does potentially help keep some of these people as productive member in the labor force while they're between jobs. So it helps pay some of those expenses. But again, the goal is to try to get them to the next employable spot in their careers. Okay, so record highs, record lows, just to show you how wacky and extremely tight the labor market has been the last couple of years. The reason why the reason why employers are not finding people is not because people really aren't willing to work. It's because so many people are working and very few people are unemployed. So of all of these were record lows except for the job postings per unemployed. That was a high. We went over 3 times the number of job postings per unemployed person in the state of Idaho during most of 2022. We're currently back down to about 1.5 times, which means there are still more job postings than unemployed, although it's not quite as strangling as it was. The rest of them are record lows in the series. So the unemployment rate in 2022 was the lowest ever since records started in 1976. But I also want to mention, as you can see here, that 2018 and 19 were the previous lows. So we were at a tight labor market before the pandemic hit. And then I said it tightened up again. And now we've just been excessively tight. The number of paid weeks for Idaho total was the lowest since 1972. Again, if you look at this, when you look at the top 5, they're all recent years, 2018, 2019, 22, 2023. Number of initial claims is the lowest since 1973 and was a little bit lower than 2019. But again, you've got these recent time periods that are all showing we're not just in a tight labor market over the last 6 months. We've been in a tight labor market for the last 6 years. And it's unlikely that's going to change very quickly, unfortunately. But it is just another thing that is making it so difficult and frustrating. And I feel the pain of these employers because they feel like no one is wanting their job anymore, and they're getting burnt out and exhausted. But they're not alone. It's kind of what's happening, and I'm sorry it's so painful. But it's not unemployment that caused this. It's the fact that our job market is running so strong that there's simply not enough people to fill all the positions. Okay, so now let's switch to the meat of this and really, really talk this through on what the navigators do in order to help these claimants through the process. So Dustin, tell me a little bit about what does a navigator do?
Well, our navigator team, we have them located in our local offices, of which we have one in Post Falls. We have a couple of gals out in Pocatello, as well as Idaho Falls, Twin Falls here in Boise, and where you and Andrea are up in Lewiston. They assist claimants, helping them file claims in the office. There's a certain percentage of folks in our population that, for whatever reason, they run into barriers or have trouble filing claims. It might be high-speed internet access, which is a big thing in the northern part of the state, or It could just be that they don't have comfortability with using computers. There's a lot of reasons why people need to come in and get our help, but that's what the role the navigators play in our local offices is helping smooth the path to make sure that claimants can get claims established. A big portion of that is they help claimants get through the ID.me process. With the pandemic in 2020, as everybody knows that's listening, we had a lot of fraud. And so we partnered with a company called ID.me that helps us make sure that we are dealing with who they purport themselves to be when we're filing a claim. And that's helped out a great deal. But it's also a bit of a road bump for some folks who struggle with this stuff normally. So that's a large part of what our navigators do. They just smooth the path. They help them get through the ID verification process. They help them file claims. If we can't get them through ID verification, there's a separate path that a claimant can take to become eligible and receive benefits that don't involve having to go through ID.me. So that's basically what they're there, is to help smooth that process out.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Andrea, as one of our actual in-office navigators, I was trying to think about an example to use in this webinar, and lo and behold, real life came through and actually gave me the best example ever that we can use in real time. So yesterday in Lewiston, one of our restaurant chains actually closed abruptly. Employees were not notified. There was a sign on the door saying, sorry, we're closed. And so walk me through kind of at the very beginning of this process, how do the conversations go with these people who maybe had a job yesterday and suddenly don't have a job today through no fault of their own? Tell me what happens here.
So I've mentioned before, losing a job isn't easy, and it's especially not easy when you're not prepared for that. So coming in the door, they're a little confused on what the process is. Maybe they've never filed for unemployment before. Maybe they have 15 years ago. It kind of depends as well. But they kind of just need to get things established to know what that next step is going to be. And so money is a big thing. They don't have that money coming in. So unemployment and coming here helps them get that first part established of making sure some money is coming in. From there, once we do that, we kind of do a handoff to other local office staff here in the office to help provide some additional resources, assistance between looking for work. Maybe they've been with that job for 10 years. Maybe they don't have a resume. Maybe they don't know how to fill out online applications. Maybe they don't have a computer at home to be able to fill out these online applications. So it's a general starting point coming here into our office, which the navigators are located in a one-stop. And with the one-stops, they assist with exploring careers. They give referrals for training programs. They do a lot of different job search and provide resources that are not just locally resources, but many other resources that they can have access to and help them get to that next step. But it's just this is their first step. They don't know what to do. And so them coming in here connects them with a bunch of different resources and gets that in place for that unemployment so that they start having an income coming in, because that's, they just found out. They don't know quite what that next step is going to look for. So getting the unemployment and some money coming in helps with that next step to be able to, do you have a resume? What types of work can we help you look for? So it's just kind of a good start to get a few things in the works to help them be successful in finding that next step.
Perfect. Would you say it's a little bit of chaos at the very beginning of just trying to find their way through the process?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Things change. Processes change. Maybe they've never been through the process before. So it's either a learning thing or possibly it's been so long since they've had to go through the process that everything's changed. So definitely they don't kind of know which direction to go. And they're just kind of going from one starting point and getting additional resources to help with the process.
So Dustin, what kind of documentation is required of these people, and how do they connect with a navigator? What's the best option there?
The documentation that we look for when we're trying to verify someone's identity the manual way, we want them to bring in their driver's license and their social security card. We take images of those, we send them to our main office here in Boise, and then we'll have a one of our in-house claim specialists who work on the phone will reach out to that claimant and take the claim questionnaire over the phone and get them started that way. But what Andrea can do in most cases, I think, and hopefully Andrea agrees with this, when we have somebody come in, if they bring their driver's license, we can go through the ID.me process and get them verified, which involves a visual scan and some other processes that they understand to keep to themselves to verify that this person is who they say they are. That's the happy path. Once we can get somebody through the ID.me process, then they have access to file their own claim and manage their claim and set up direct deposit, do all kinds of things. But if we have to file it for them, that means they won't have online access. So we do have a manual process that helps these people. And there's a significant number of people in the state that require that next level, that manual process. For whatever reason, let's say they've gotten married and their last name has changed, or it's a Spanish speaker and the last two names are flip-flopped. Just simple things like that can really throw a wrench in the works sometimes. And like Andrea said, our priority is to help eligible claimants get paid as quickly as possible. So that's our main focus. And we don't want to, delay the whole process by waiting on ID.me or waiting for the claimant to get their stuff together. So we'll go ahead and get the claim in place for them, but they won't be able to draw any money out of it until we get the proper documentation or until we get the ID verified like we should. So that's kind of the whole process.
Perfect. Andrew, how often does it happen that you see in your local office that people are unable to get through the initial phase in order to file? And then as far as, anyways, let's go with that one. How often do you see that they have issues with the actual filing process itself?
Some things it's not so much of issues, but also of the technology. A lot of individuals in my area don't want to go through the process, and they want to do a paper form. They don't have the internet access, or it could be that it's not about documents. They have everything that they need. They're just not comfortable going through that identity verification process. So it all depends on the person and if they want to attempt to go through it or not. Having documents we can usually work around that. We've done it enough that each navigator has encountered their own issues with people, and we've found some very good ways to potentially try to get a claim through ID.me sooner than later. But like Justin mentioned, we do have a backup plan if need be. Worst case scenario, we still get that claim going and sort everything out because we want to make sure we're not holding up their benefits. But it's just a preference, usually around my area.
Perfect. Thank you. So on the slide here, we can see actually this is US numbers for 2022. This was a study done along with those questions in the current population survey of whether you're to determine if you're unemployed or not. There was also additional questions of, have you filed? And if you did or didn't, why? And this was some of the data that came out of that, is that only about a quarter of unemployed people nationally actually spent the time to file for claims. But when you look on the right side here, of those almost 3/4 people that didn't, some of them I think may have potentially missed out. Like over half of them, they just expected to be ineligible. Dustin, can you talk me through about how well is a navigator able to determine eligibility with some initial conversations with the claimant?
That's a great question. We encourage, excuse me, we encourage anyone who is out of work to file a claim, regardless of their circumstance. If you've been working and you find yourself out of work, then please file a claim. We'll determine eligibility, and what we look for is if the employer, just like your restaurants locally that closed up, if there was just flat no more work available, I'm sorry, we've had to close our shop down or we've had to do labor reductions, then we look at that as you're going to be eligible on that particular issue. We're not going to do an investigation to determine eligibility because you're out of work through no fault of your own by default if you've been laid off. So that's the happy path. If you have been separated and you either quit or you were discharged or fired, we investigate both of those circumstances to determine eligibility because A claimant has to be out of work through no fault of their own, basically. So if the investigation turns up that the claimant, let's say, stole some merchandise, and they have a video that proves this, then we're going to go ahead and deny that claimant. That is just the way it goes. They have led to their own dismissal, and the same thing is true with quits. We have to verify that the quit was related to the employment and not due to personal circumstances on the claimant's side, and that the claimant did everything they could before taking that ultimate step to quit their job. So we have pretty tight guidelines that we follow when it comes to eligibility that way. As far as what the navigators, how they interact in that, there's a certain number of things that can pop up on a claim that a navigator can address. And these are like daily things, like the questionnaire asks if a person was out of town, and if they say yes, then we need to get some more information to determine eligibility. And that's where somebody like Andrea could take that information. They are capable of doing that in the offices themselves, but often we ask them to have that claimant call in and speak with a claim specialist here in our office, because they're helping people face to face. And sometimes those issues can take more than a moment to figure out. So we really want them to focus on taking care of the claimants in the offices that are coming in. But they are fully capable of all of the things that you would get help with if you called in. You can get the same kind of assistance from a claims or from one of our navigators. But when it comes to jobs, losing jobs, and especially with if you've been fired or if you quit, then those issues is what we call them, the things that stop a claim from being paid until we investigate it. Those would go to our adjudication team, and they would do all of the conversations with the employer and then with the claimant and determine eligibility that way, which can sometimes take 4 to 6 weeks. Right now we're in the slow period, so it's not taking that long. We're getting those through pretty quickly, but we always like to, over deliver and saying that right? Yeah, over deliver and under promise. But hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. So Andrea, this one's for you. So we've kind of hinted at a little bit. There's a little bit of a duration between when you file your first claim and when that money actually comes in. And looking at some of this, some people plan to be working so soon they didn't bother even filing claims. What's kind of the time frame here that we're looking at that's normally expected?
It all depends on the person and I guess the industry that they're looking at. Sometimes with a separation, it can take, we usually tell everyone 3 to 6 weeks to get a determination made on that. But if someone's unemployed due to no fault of their own, they serve a waiting week and then instantly start getting payments. My experience here in the local office, I don't see a long time. They are usually employed within, I would say, 4 to 6 weeks for those individuals. Sometimes they don't get a first payment. It just depends on the industry they're looking at and if they have any barriers that are hindering them from employment, and just a lot of different factors with them. But there's many times somebody will come in and sign up and they've got a job before they even receive any unemployment benefits.
Perfect. Thank you. And then go ahead. Go ahead, Justin.
I just want to jump on there and say, even if that's the case, if somebody turns around and gets a job, which is true, and that's a good thing, but there's usually a gap that these people are dealing with. So I still encourage people to go ahead and file the claim. Even if you have a job and it's not starting for a couple of weeks, or whatever the case is, even if you've got something lined up, go ahead and file the claim, because all kinds of things can happen. And I've seen this happen a lot, where offers fall through or things happen, and now somebody's 6 or 8 weeks down the road and they're like, oh, now I'm getting desperate, and then they file the claim. We can't backdate. The law doesn't allow us to backdate somebody to when they were separated with their employer. So it's really important to go ahead and get that claim established, even if you don't think you're going to need it, just in case as a backup, to make sure that you're eligible back to the time that you actually were unemployed.
Perfect. Thank you. So here's kind of a breakdown of what we saw for unemployment claims by industry over the last couple of years. You can see that the top one is construction. In my mind, a pretty business cyclical industry, also very seasonal industry. And then followed by essentially kind of the admin and support, which are a lot of temporary jobs on contract, and then manufacturing is kind of behind that. Is this surprising to either of you? Let's start with Andrea on this one. Is this makeup surprising, or is this more kind of what you expect to see in your region?
Definitely, this is normal.
Okay. So with that said, let's talk about, we've hinted at some of this with technology, but really there's going to be some people that fall through the cracks without some additional help, no matter whether it's technology or whether it's something else. Dustin, do you want to address kind of who are we talking about here that might not make it through the process? Let's just say this one more time. We may have said it already, but
we're always going to have a certain percentage of folks that live in the state who just need help for whatever reason, and it could be a short-term thing. Maybe they're in between households, maybe they don't have their internet set up, or it could be a long-term need. We have a lot of folks who work well into their late 70s. We talk to them quite frequently, and I'm in my mid 50s, so I certainly understand how things have changed over the last 30, 20 years, or even the last 10 years, as far as how to go out and get a job. And it's very different than it was 20 years ago. So I'm thinking of, your average 50, 55-year-old person has worked in their company for 30 years, and now they're out looking for something. It's going to be a very different circumstance for them. So we recognize this. We're also talking about people who lack the technical skills. Andrea, maybe in a bit, she can tell us about a large portion of the folks that she deals with, because where she is in the state, we have a lot of logging interest around there. So she deals with a lot of people who they don't even have an email address sometimes. So, we really, being that we are charged with taking care of everybody in the state of Idaho, not just those that are willing to get up and get out and do this. We really want to find those who are underserved and who don't do this, or just aren't as up to speed with the technology side of things, or for whatever reason they have a barrier. We want to talk to those folks, and we realized pretty quickly that navigator role was needed. So back about 8 years ago, we kind of did some moves where we took some people out of the local offices, and after a short period of time, we realized we needed them in the local offices, and then we've been there since. So we've been doing this for several years now, and it's gone very, very well. We have a really good track record of helping people.
perfect. So Andrea, here's your segue. So tell us a little bit about your region in particular and what you see as far as the groups of population that need additional help in general.
Mine are definitely seasonal loggers that in rural areas. They drive here, 30 to 60 miles away sometimes just to receive the one-on-one assistance, to get their claim set up, either to do a paper form or to get a plan in place to be able to get that claim set up correctly, make sure that it is all in place, and then make a plan to be able to do their weekly claims from there on out. They usually will find family members possibly to help them. They might go to a library or even one of our remote locations where we don't have a navigator each week to do that weekly claim and receive a little bit of guidance and assistance and use our computers. So I definitely see, based on the chart that we're seeing, the age groups of the males are my largest populations here. And like Dustin said, they don't usually have email addresses. You ask them if they have a smartphone. They do usually have a smartphone, but they don't know how to work it. And that is not where their expertise lies. So they really, really appreciate the assistance. They're more than willing to drive where they need to make sure they get that assistance to be able to continue on that. They have had times in the past when our navigator services were not offered, that they potentially didn't draw because they felt like the process was too difficult and they didn't receive the assistance that they needed to help get through it. So they're very grateful for the navigators at the offices to be able to go in. And I am sure that each office in each region has a certain industry that they serve that we're really, really grateful that we are there. So in my area, it just so happens that I get a lot from rural areas that are more than happy to drive in just to make sure that they're doing everything for us.
Perfect. Thank you. That leads us right into the changing of the seasons. So Idaho has significant seasonality, but as I also mentioned at the beginning, we have a very much overweight concentration of occupations that are outside and weather dependent. So when we look here, we can actually see this is from the May of 2023 Occupation Wage Survey by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The employment concentration says that if you had the same employment concentration as the nation as a whole, your number would be 1. So by Idaho showing up over 2, we have over 2 times people in these occupations compared to what we would expect to have given our total level of employment. You can see that we rank in the top 5 in both farming, fishing, forestry, and construction. And then if we go on here, this is a little bit of a look of just frost dates, spring frost dates. If you look in Idaho, you can see one that Idaho is incredibly diverse. So there are some areas that don't have frost nearly as others, but there's others that have frost potentially well into June. There's a high majority of Idaho that is seeing frost freezes even between mid-October and mid-May. And so Dustin, kind of address a little bit of some examples you're aware of that where work cannot be performed when weather is under a certain temperature.
That's really relevant to our state too, because like you said, we have a lot of different regions and the temperatures can vary wildly. But just a couple of industries. Well, one, Andrea's is one of the biggest ones because this was new to me when I started in this work. But it turns out that you can't drive on logging roads year round. The forestry service says when the roads are not in good shape, which the big spring thaw and sometimes in the fall this happens, they'll shut them down. And when they do that, they need to file and become eligible to receive benefits. So that's one industry right there. Another one I can think of off the top of my head is road paving or road construction. Asphalt, and this I didn't know this before, as an average citizen, but asphalt plants don't run under a certain temperature. They just don't. They shut them down because it's too cost prohibitive to probably fuel them during the winter, during the cold months. So they have a kind of a date that they shut down. It's usually in October. I'm saying that as a layman, I really don't know, but it's sometime around that is when I feel like those claims start to spike. And we're not just talking about construction workers, but anytime there's a construction job, we have a whole other crew of people that are holding signs and directing traffic and helping that construction happen safely. So we get those people too. And then we have wildland firefighters, and they operate on a completely different schedule. They're the busiest, well, not on a completely different schedule. They are the busiest in the summertime when the fires are happening. So it's important for unemployment insurance to be made available to these groups of people, because when they go for a month at a time or a couple of weeks here and there shut down, the employers would really prefer not to have to go out and hire a whole new crew and train them, because that's incredibly expensive. So we offer them the opportunity to become employer attached. If they know that they're going to be going back to that same employer within 16 weeks, we're going to go ahead and say, you don't have to do the work search requirement. We know you're going to go back within the correct amount of time, within the legal amount of time. Therefore, we can attach you. So that helps out a great deal, and is really meant to help the employers maintain their trained workforce. And because of all of the seasonality that we have, from people that run ski lifts to people that guide whitewater rafters down rivers and everything in between, and fishing and hunting and all of those things, we really need our unemployment insurance to recognize this fact about our state and to do what they can, to make sure that we're appealing to all of those people. And like we've been talking about, sometimes it's hard to find those people, but that's why the navigators are there. They really do a lot of outreach too, not just taking claimants in, but we go and talk to employers in our communities and help them understand, what it takes to file and become eligible. And I'd say that's a big, as Andrea could say, that's a big part of the job also, is doing the outreach to help let people know that we're here. So hopefully that answers that.
Excellent. So again, Andrea, he segued you right in there. So what kind of resources do you have for employers that either have to lay off seasonally or have an unexpected layoff? Maybe it's their first time ever and they're having to lay off some of their employees. What can you offer to help them through the process?
So if it is something planned, we can always schedule a date to come out and meet with the employers and the employees to let them know the same processes. We can schedule appointments here in the office for them to come in and do a group session. We can do lots of different things to help them through that process. We can just go and hand out some materials. If it's a permanent closure, the department usually works in a group, and we do what's called a rapid response. and where we give them much more resources in regards to training programs that are available, work search, resume assistance, some of the other stuff on the other side of the coin from unemployment insurance. But we definitely, any way that we can help out if we're aware of the situation. There's even situations sometimes that we aren't aware of. I think I brought up an example to both you and Dustin recently of an employer that in the paper said that they were closing for renovations. And I reached out to them and I said, hey, you know, what services can we help you guys provide during this transition where your space is going to be closed and nobody's going to be able to work for the next month or two. And so it's also knowing our labor market and the employers around us as well too, and just having that comfortable position, I guess, in the community where they know. I've been at my office for quite a long time, so I know that various businesses know that when I show up, oh, it's the unemployment rate. So I've been around for a little bit, so some employers they talk amongst each other as well too, and tell each other, oh, go talk to the Department of Labor and things like that. So it's just been something in our community being around that people will also spread the word and talk to other people and things like that. So it's a lot of networking between employers and employees and sending out the letters. We do send out letters, and when we aren't at our super busy time to employers, just saying, hey, we're here for you. If there's anything that we can help you out with, please reach out to us and let us know.
Perfect. I mean, that probably helps reduce a little bit of the chaos that goes on with some of this process. Now, not only employees may not know how to really go through it, but employers are probably in that situation as well. So quick look here. This is the last 12 months. And what I wanted to mention was you've heard Dustin and Andrea both respond to employer attached. And so these are seasonal layoffs, but they're expected to go back to work for that employer after the weather cooperates, essentially, or the season changes. And so what I just wanted to show here is that almost half of all of claims in the last year were actually employer attached. And so they were related to not having any work to do during that certain period of season. But if this unemployment insurance wasn't there, they might potentially change occupations, or they may potentially leave Idaho in complete whole. So just to show you, just if you look here in November, December, and January specifically, you can see that the number of employer attached is about 60% of all claims at this period of time. So they outnumber those who are actually work seeking. And so even though unemployment claims are actually very, very low and unemployment's incredibly low, there's actually a lot of people that still aren't looking for work because they have a job. They simply just don't have anything to do at the current moment. And so I think that's important to point out to employers too, that even though there are some people on unemployment, doesn't mean that they're actively trying to be hired. It sometimes means that they simply don't have something at that point in time, but they plan to. These are a lot of skilled laborers. When you talk about, Dustin talks about road crews and forestry and fishers, they have special skills that I think would really harm the state if this program wasn't here. Okay, so Dustin, let's discuss. There's so many regulations and restrictions around eligibility and unemployment, but let's talk about, there's things changing July 1st with the new laws that passed this legislative session. Can you kind of walk us through what the current law is now for those who are work seeking and what it's going to change to?
We come July 1st, when this legislation takes effect, in our legislators' wisdom, they opted to change the requirements that our work-seeking claimants have. So there are two types of claimants. There's those that are out looking for a job, and then those that are job attached. But before I go into that, I want to make a point about your previous slide that just kind of occurred to me, which is interesting to me. If you'll notice, in the months of April and March, and a little less in May, but mostly April and March, you see how much more people are attached than they are the rest of the year. That really shows kind of the nature of our state, because what you have is you have people that will have off-season work, and they just need a little help to maybe a month or maybe 3 weeks to get them through until they go to their regular off-season job. So they might work on the ski hill during the wintertime, and then they might work for a rafting outfit in the summertime, and then they have this period of time where it wouldn't make sense for them to go out and find a new line of work. when they know that they're going to be doing that job. So I just thought that was interesting to point out. But as far as this change coming in July, for those that we're asking to go out and look for a job and find employment, they're changing the rules on how they show how they're looking for that or their interest in finding another job. One of the part of the law in unemployment insurance says that a person has to be willing, able, and of the mindset where they're wanting to go out and look for work. So instead of us asking for a specific number of job contacts, like you've gone out and asked X amount of employers for work, which in the past has been 2, the legislature has changed it now where we're looking for 5 different what we call work search activities. So it's opening it up a little more, not saying just, did you go stand in front of an employer and ask for a job, which is in some ways is kind of antiquated because there's so many things we do online now. But it's incorporating those things that show that a person is willing to accept a new job, like working on your resume is one of those 5 things. Going to an employment fair is one of those 5 things. So now that's how it's going to be as of July 1st. There's going to be some more information, excuse me, coming out about that in the near future.
Perfect. Thank you. Andrea, how do you think the regulations are going to change maybe the flow of office traffic that you see?
I think it's definitely going to increase it, which is going to be a good thing. It's going to bring more people here into the office to attend workshops or classes that are being held, or more assistance with resumes. So I think it's going to be a great thing to get more people in here just to make sure things are moving smoothly for them and that they're meeting that new criteria as it changes.
Do you think it'll actually result in more touches with more Department of Labor personnel in other departments?
Absolutely. Between training programs, it's going to get a lot of people that are unemployment or that are on unemployment that they've maybe made a phone call to the claims specialist, but haven't made it into our office and needed any assistance or our computers. It's going to get people in that haven't been in before, and it's going to get them to see that we offer more services than being the unemployment department. So they're going to see that we have trainings and resources for resumes. I have numerous people that will indicate that they are paying to get their resume done, where our services are free here with resumes. But people just don't know that. There's been no reason for them to come in. And having those additional activities will hopefully get some more people in to let them know about more of what we can do for them here at the Department of Labor.
And the important question, do you feel that it might help them get to work faster or gain new skills for future work searches?
I think both. Absolutely, it's going to be both of them. We're going to get people doing more activities each week than just focusing on 2 things. And they're going to be caught in with more things. So yes, they're going to maybe be connected to some training programs that they weren't aware of. That could be short-term training programs that could take them into a whole different industry or occupation. So it looks good on getting, even if having people ask more questions about these work search activities and those things are going to get them in here to see a little bit more about what we're about.
Excellent. That is really the end of my presentation. Do either of you have final comments before we take questions on anything that we may have missed that you want to really make sure that both employers and possible claimants know?
Well, for our part, I can say that the work that our navigators do is really critical to the success of the program in the state. And I think that, not really understanding this coming into it when I started with the department back those years ago, I've really learned a lot, and I understand now how our services are underutilized in the local offices as far as getting people back to work, and that this change in how we're doing the work search activities will really help open that up. And I think it's going to lead to a lot of successful stories where people are using our services and becoming gainfully employed and really get the engine working. So I think that that's a really good thing.
Andrea?
I truly enjoy doing what I do. I've said it before, losing a job isn't easy. Unemployment is not easy. as well to figure out that process and what you need to do. So when people come in here frustrated, needing some additional assistance, and just wanting a little bit more guidance and getting somebody as a unemployment navigator to help them through that process, they definitely leave our office feeling so much better about everything. They could have just lost their job, and even though this doesn't fix everything right then and there, it gets them to that next step and it connects them with the resources. So I really enjoy having people come in here and having them leave feeling much better than when they first came in. So
Thank you. Excellent. Greg, any questions?
Well, I've got some. Lisa, I have a question for you actually. So, unemployment insurance is a very large program. It's very dense and it's very complicated. And look, the slides you made for this is what we've seen in your webinars about 5% of the total number you've made. So I was just kind of curious, what in this process for you was perhaps the most revealing part of the analysis for you? What was your big takeaway from that you didn't know before, perhaps?
My big takeaway was the low number of unemployed people that actually file claims and are actually approved for claims. And so I was shocked that it was 1/5 of Idaho's unemployed people. I expected so many things to be kind of weird, but the fact that we set so many low records these last couple of years really shows it comes back to just how tight Idaho's labor market is. If you call the US labor market tight, take that up a couple notches and you've got Idaho, because we have the nation's fastest growing population. Our labor force is growing incredibly fast. We have businesses opening, but we still have this void that gets kind of left behind. But the fact that it was such a small portion of unemployed was really probably the big takeaway for me in the research.
Great. And I want to extend thanks to Andrea and Dustin as well. And I have one follow-up question. I think you kind of addressed it already, but I just want to state it succinctly in terms of the question. What are as navigators, what are the most common misconceptions about unemployment insurance, either from an employer side or from the claimant side that you deal with as part of your going about your business, basically, as a navigator?
This is an easy one for me because employers tend to think that we're on the claimant side, and claimants tend to think that we're on the employer side when it comes to separations. I'd say that's one of the biggest misperceptions. We're on neither. We're gathering facts to make determinations based on the law. So we take all the information, we compare it to how the law works in unemployment insurance, and then we determine eligibility that way. And another one that was kind of, I don't know, I think that people really have no idea what we can do in a local office or what services the Idaho Department of Labor can offer folks that are looking for work. Andrea mentioned a really good one, like they'll pay somebody to help them with their resume. They can get that quality of service, that same level of service at no charge through our local offices, and then some. There's all kinds of return to work programs that we can steer people towards. There's WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, that has a lot of provisions to help people retrain for different types of work, even as little as getting gas money to go to a job. So there's a huge variety of things that we can do that's beyond unemployment insurance. And a lot of folks come in and that's where they're focused because they're looking to get paid. And I understand that and very much empathetic towards that. But I think, especially with the work search changes, it's going to help people see the Department of Labor maybe in a slightly different light as a partner that can help them find a job and not just pay them unemployment insurance. So those are my thoughts.
From our seat at the Department of Labor and looking at labor market information, kind of, looking at the quantitative side, we always kind of look at how things are changing, if they're not, and what their levels are, and kind of how they've compared to the last 10 years or whatever time frame we're looking at. I'm just curious from a qualitative standpoint, or just in terms of your experience, has your experience as a navigator and what you see in Idaho's economy expressed through the stakeholders coming into your office, has that changed at all, stayed the same? And if it's changed, how has it changed?
I don't have any actual data to back it up, but I would like to say that we have been able to reach deeper into the recesses of Idaho and really find people that otherwise wouldn't be eligible. And a lot of our efforts, especially in the last, since the pandemic, has been really trying to find where people are so that we can provide services to them to help them get back to work. And that's one of our major functions at the Department of Labor. I know that we've kind of done this and then back up. So after the Great Recession, we pulled all the folks out of local offices and we centralized our operations here in Boise. And then shortly after that, we got a ton of feedback from from the governor's office and various other folks where they were really missing the one-on-one help that we had in the offices previous to that. So that kind of led to us launching the Navigator program so that we could capture that percentage of Idaho, residents or workers that otherwise would not be successful getting through the electronic process. So, and even if they do get to the electronic process, we're there to help them with that too. So it's not like if you go into the office, you have to go the paper way, the written form way. We can help you get logged in and help you establish a presence on our claimant portal and help you understand how to file a claim just the same, even if you don't need that kind of help. So yeah, I think we're reaching deeper, and we've gone through a lot of weird things with the recession or with the pandemic, but we have emerged we're much stronger than we were, I think, previous to the pandemic. We're a lot more flexible, and I think we're working more closely with the local offices than we ever have to, like Andrea alluded to, hand off that person once we help them. Okay, now the money thing is situated. Let's help you find some more work, and that handoff is really critical, and we've been doing a good job of that too. So I think it's changed for the better.
That's great. Thank you, Dustin. Lisa, we're at the end of our time. Any last comment before we sign off?
In closing, I just want to say I sincerely appreciate the work you guys do. I think I overhear a lot of people that come in, they're frustrated, they're confused, they don't know what their next step is. And I think they would fall through the cracks without the navigators in place. Unemployment is a critical piece of keeping our labor force running, because even though they may not be employed, they're looking for employment and they're trying to be a productive member of our labor force. And so to keep them there, you have to have bridges financially sometimes, and this is one of them. And Andrea's back on, so I'm going to let her have the very last word. Andrea, is there anything that you think as far as what's changed the last couple of years versus when you were a navigator pre-pandemic? Are you seeing big changes in the stakeholders and who you're reaching?
The big change has been ID.me. So it's definitely bringing a lot more people into the office with that type of technology implement into our system and identity documents. So definitely it's been a big change in the last couple of years.
Perfect. Well, with that, I want to thank you so much for attending, and I really want to extend sincere thanks to Dustin and Andrea for kind of giving a glimpse of the navigators and realize that they're there. Said both for employers and the claimant side, there are resources here at the Department of Labor to help with this process, which is not a fun one for anyone involved. So thank you again for attending.
Thank you.